Dawn loosened its first pale thread across Vulture Peak as the teacher sat unmoving, the mountain breathing around him. A small smile, barely the weight of a petal, appeared on his lips, and the world seemed to lean in. Ananda felt his ribs tighten, as if a door had closed behind him. Punna's breath snagged like a fish on a reed. Sati's eyes narrowed into Doctrine's little cage. Vidura counted what he might lose. Gautam remembered a child's cooled brow and feared love. Without ownership, Mira tasted a bitter root on her tongue and could not name it. The potter's hands in memory collapsed a wobbling bowl. Mashyapa recognized the sky in a puddle and said nothing. In the Sangha, hearts pricked by silence, murmured omens while the smile remained like clear water that refuses to hold a face. By mid-morning, the path down from the ridge filled with hushed arguments, omen readers casting nets of words over a fish of silence. Seti declared that teachings must be locked like grain against moisture. Ananda pleaded for patience and felt his plea tremble. Vidura weighed auspicious timings as if freedom needed a calendar, and somewhere inside the quiet of it, all the smile kept reflecting them back, as if the mountain had placed a mirror where they expected a door. At the bamboo grove, the air smelled of rain and sap. Punna practiced his breath like counting river stones and lost track at 3. Mira steeped leaves for calming and found the bitterness honest. Gautam hovered between grief and gratitude like a bird unwilling to choose a branch. And in the hush, the sound of the Buddha's sandals did not come. Only the bell's single strike, asking them to sit with their fear instead of solving it. When evening gathered, Mahakashyapa approached Ananda without ceremony and said, "Sometimes a smile is a bridge that refuses weight." And Ananda, feeling the ache of being the one who always asked and rarely understood, bowed and carried the message to the assembly. Tonight there would be contemplation, no discourse, no answers, and the announcement moved through the cells like a wind through lamp flames. Some steadied, others guttered. Night deepened until the grove became a listening animal. The assembly sat, each with their private storm. Shadi barricaded his mind with definitions. Vidura counted offerings he might bring to bribe fate. Punna begged his legs to be mountains. Gautam, let memory loosen one finger at a time. Mura watched, steam turned to breath, and breath to nothing. The potter's tale turned in some minds like an unfinished bowl, and the Buddha entered at last, smiling as before, and they felt the cliff beneath their stories, and the wind that asks only to be let through. Nanad washed a bowl by the well and found the water giving back a wavering crescent of a smile that was not his, and he felt the old ache of a child who reaches for a lamp, just as it is lifted away. He tried to anchor himself to the rhythm of breath and the clink of clay, but each sound opened a room where the teacher was not, and the fear that love might ask him to stand alone pressed against his ribs like a closed gate, until he realized the pressure came from his own hand, holding it shut. Soti sat under the eaves binding palm leaf pages, with a cord as if a doctrine could be made safe by tight knots. Each pull steadied him, each knot whispered that if words were perfect, they could keep emptiness from untying him. And when a breeze lifted the top leaf, he snatched it back with a small anger that tasted like fear, promising himself that tomorrow he would demand an answer shaped like a wall. At the city gate, Vidura rehearsed a vow of generosity that sounded suspiciously like a bargain, cataloging garlands and rice and sandalwood, as if the cosmos kept ledgers. He imagined the teacher blessing his house and his rank, then caught himself bargaining with water while drowning, and his lips shaped an apology the wind carried away before he could hear it. When the assembly gathered in the mango grove, the Buddha spoke of a man clinging to a burning reed, while the cool bank waited an arm's length away, and the murmurs turned sharp because parables expose fingers more than flames. Punna flushed with shame. Nananda felt seen and unshielded. Seti counted logical holes to hide in, and the smile, still unspoken, hung between them like the river itself, neither accusing nor consoling, only present. By nightfall, a rumor moved like wildfire through dry grass that the teacher's smile signaled his leaving, and the fear it carried burned hotter than any farewell. Some packed their hearts into vows and offerings, others into accusations sharpened for defense, while a few sat very still and let the rumor pass through like wind through reeds, discovering that the only departure that mattered was the one they refused to make from their own stories. Liti gathered a knot of restless monks beneath the shade of a neem and spoke with the careful severity of a man stacking bricks against weather. He called uncertainty a leak in the roof and urged them to ask for words to stop the rain. And his certainty was a kind of music that made frightened hearts march in step, until even Ananda, passing by with quiet eyes, felt the pull of wanting the sky to be ceiling. The clatter of a small procession announced Vijura, who entered like a man trying to stitch fate with garlands, his attendants balancing trays of rice and sandalwood, and the quiet fear he would not name. He bowed toward the assembly and asked for an auspicious discourse, and the request slid across the air like a polished blade. Bright, decisive, hungry for yes. At dusk, the ground swelled with townsfolk and monks, and a raised platform was cleared. The Buddha took his seat, and the murmur settled as water finds its level. Then questions came like arrows seeking a fixed target. What is the fixed target? Sign. Hey, what must we hold? And the teacher let each arrow fall into the grass with a look that asked the archer who they were without a bow. Who is the one who is afraid? The Buddha asked the man who demanded a refuge that would not move. And when another begged for the single true sentence, he replied, "Which ear would you keep forever?" The assembly, trained to chase answers, found itself running into itself, and silence began to grow like a tree whose roots were already under their feet. At the pause between questions, the Buddha lifted a plain village bowl and held it as one might hold a newborn or an empty sky. The smile touched his mouth again, and a tremor passed through the crowd. Some felt robbed of words, some freed of weight, some frightened that meaning could be so light, and the bowl revealed itself as everything they brought to it, and nothing it kept. Morning broke with the clarity of rinsed glass, and the teacher reached into the scrub at the platform's edge and lifted a small wildflower, not as a puzzle but as a world, its stem trembling in the hush. The assembly leaned forward, waiting for a sentence to net the moment, yet no net came, only the unmoving smile and the motion of the flower, and terror rose, because the mind could not perch on a word, only on what was here. Bright and empty, complete. The murmur turned sharp. Steady declared that silence was a veil for withholding, and that a true teacher names the road. Vijura asked for confirmation of auspicious order, and others pleaded for a seal of words, as if the river would be safer boxed in clay. The Buddha only looked at them the way light looks at dust, not judging, simply revealing the dance already happening. In the pause after the heat, Mahakshapa caught the teacher's eye and answered with a smile so small it could have been a breath. The world seemed to tilt into an intimacy no sentence could enter, like two birds recognizing sky in each other's wings, and for a moment the crowd was a distant shore, and the flower was the whole ocean held on a stem. By afternoon, the Sangha bent into two currents, those who wanted statements stacked like bricks, and those who discovered breadth widening when nothing was built. Cells and cloisters filled with lists and counterlists, while, under the neem, a few sat and listened to wind and footfall and the ache of wanting to be told. And the day wore their division like a robe stitched down the middle. Night gathered like a listening bowl. Inside one hall, the scratch of stylus on leaf sought to trap thunder in script, while in the courtyard, a circle let crickets write the only commentary. Nananda felt the ache loosen as he watched the sky refuse to be explained. Punna's breath found its own gate. Kizum Gautam's opened on her knees, as if releasing a child to sleep. And somewhere beyond the eaves, the teacher's smile moved through the dark like weather. Neither for nor against, only free. They walked beyond the last huts where dogs stopped barking, and the ground turned to ash and wind. The Buddha said nothing, and the quiet made its own instruction as the night pressed close. Punna's breath clattered like a pot lid. Nanda felt tears arrive before reason. Siddhi gripped certainty like a torch that smoked his eyes. Kiss Gautam stood as if listening for a child who had become the sky. Mira counted heartbeats until counting let go. Vijura measured his rank against the dark and found both weightless, and Makshyapa, seeing fear rise and fall, let it pass through as naturally as wind through reeds, while the smile, unharmed by shadow, made room for everything that came and went. At the potter's shed the wheel hummed like a low chant, and the old man told how he once forced a bowl to keep its shape, and it cracked in the sun. Now, he said, he lets collapse arrive when the clay asks, and the falling teaches him a vessel is born where hands stop insisting. Siddhi winced, as if the words were sand in his teeth. Ananda exhaled as if allowed to be soft, and the Buddha's smile turned the story into a mirror none could escape. Mira boiled leaves in a copper pot and set a coil to catch the steam. When heat is kind and patient, she said, the bitter rises, and what is clear returns as itself. And the coil ticked with condensing drops like small bells. Punna watched the vapor become water, and something in him unclenched, while Kiss Gautam smiled at the way grief distilled into love when not clutched. And Vijura, counting less and listening more, left his ledger on the floor of his mind. The pressure finally cracked. Nanda wept without hiding, the tears simple as rain. Punna's panic surged and broke like a wave, leaving him breath wet and laughing once in surprise. Sati doubled down, stacking reasons like bricks against weather, his voice shaking with the labor. Vijura unbelted his scabbard and set it aside as if laying down a story. The Buddha let their storms spend themselves and did not reach to fix them, and that refusal to rescue felt like the first true kindness. When the clouds thinned, the teacher spoke of a child who ran with a kite until the string burned his palm. The child let go, and the wind kept doing wind. The sky kept doing sky, and the empty hand stung, then sang. Freedom is not held, he said, and the smile that followed felt like a gate opening onto nothing that needed guarding. And several hearts, surprised by the relief of emptiness, stepped through. Before the assembly, Azeti stepped into the open like a man bringing a storm in his mouth and demanded a truth that would not move, a line to tie the sky to. The Buddha looked at him as one looks at a knot in a net and asked, "What is afraid if the net opens?" And Siddhi's anger flashed, then trembled. Vijura rose, voice formal but frayed, and begged for a sign to anchor his house and city, a blessing he could stamp on banners, so the wind would never again be mistaken for emptiness. The teacher listened as if rain were speaking, then asked, "What banner does the wind need?" And the question loosened something in Vijura he had armored for years, a quiet he did not recognize as his own until it filled him. The Buddha spoke softly, not to convince, but to uncover. "The smile," he said without saying, "sees fear and freedom together like two sides of a single leaf. Clinging turns the leaf into a blade. Releasing makes it shade. Wah! And the mind that wants ownership trembles because it cannot hold what it already is." The words thinned until only breath remained, and many realized that the teaching was not arriving. It had been here, unhit. Every time they stopped, reaching past it, a long silence followed, not empty but full of breathing. Someone noticed birds returning to the branches, someone else the way grief could be held without being a prison. And across the circle, postures unlaced, backs found their natural height. Jaws let go of sentences. Eyes stopped hunting for refuge in the future. Siddhi lowered his gaze. Vijura's hands came to rest, palm up, and Punna met the rise and fall of his own chest, as if shaking hands with weather. As evening cooled the stones, the teacher rose and did nothing but walk to the edge of the clearing. No blessing, no seal, only the same small smile that had frightened them, now recognized as the face of what does not need to be owned. And the assembly discovered that resting in direct experience felt like setting down an invisible load. They watched a single leaf turn in the wind and, without instruction, felt complete. Dawn rinsed the air of last night's heat, and the assembly took their seats without arranging themselves into hope or fear. Nananda felt his tenderness grow his spine. Pana's hands found stillness that did not require fists. Vajra discovered that duty could bow without bargaining. Isiddhi listened as if each breath were a teacher he had never met. Keel's Gautam's love uncurled from its old fist, and Mira's practical heart widened like a door left open for wind. The Buddha entered as though the morning were walking, and the smile greeted them the way light greets a field, by simply being everywhere it touches. After the meal, the teacher said only, "Taste." And a hush fell that reached the kitchen and the fields beyond, even the sparrows pausing mid-chatter. Eating became a ceremony of noticing. Rice as rain caught, salt as ocean carried, bitterness as medicine and not an enemy. And they found that attention untied them more firmly than any vow, so that when the bowls were empty, nothing was missing, and everything was present. By afternoon, the city gates called, and they walked among carts and cattle and errands. Kisgotam spoke to a mother about love without possession. Mira set a broken cart pin with a sprig of twine and a smile. Pana taught a boy to count breaths between shouts, and Vajra, pausing before a banner seller, chose not to buy certainty in silk. Soti stood by the well and let the rumor mill clatter past him without needing to tighten a single knot, and the Buddha's smile went with them, the way shade walks with a tree. Toward evening, the potter visited, palms chalked with dry slip, and bowed with the ease of a man who understood collapse as a kind of fidelity. He laughed that his bowls had improved since he stopped saving them, and the assembly laughed with him, feeling the relief of not preserving themselves into brittleness. The Buddha's smile tilted like a crescent moon on still water, and they understood, with the gentleness of a hand letting go of a string, that refuge was not a cage, but the courage to be unheld. Night spread like deep ink, and the assembly sat without seeking an ending. The Buddha lifted his face to the stars, and the same small smile appeared. No riddle, no warning, only a mirror in which their fear had nowhere to cling. They felt the wind move through open hands and knew, not as a sentence but as a sky, that freedom does not arrive or depart. It is what remains when the story is not needed. And in that wide quiet they rested, and the world rested with them.